Welcome to Career Cafe, a podcast to help you thrive in the professional world. Today's episode, The Worth of Your Work, Negotiating Salary and Benefits. We're going to be talking, obviously, about negotiating salary and benefits. This will be so fun. And joining us today, we have Brandon Street and Madalyn Swanson with us today. Welcome back, Madalyn. We're excited to have you.
I'm happy to be back, McKinley.
She joined us a few episodes ago, and we're excited she's here. So both of them are coaches for students, and they help coach them on these very topics. So let's just dive right in and talk about researching salary and benefits before, right? And before you can just jump right in and negotiate, obviously we got to train students on how to do that, right?
That's right.
So let's do it.
Well, one of the things, I'm going to start talking about in this whole thing is a lot of jobs out there now have this open negotiation, right? A lot don't list salaries anymore for that exact reason. So you need to become a great negotiator. You do. This is an important thing that you need to understand before you get in front of an employer and they're like, all right, what would you like for a salary, right? And so a couple things I would suggest to individuals is first, you need to conduct thorough research on what people are paying in those industries. So you need to understand, if I'm coming in with just my degree, not a lot of experience, what are they paying those individuals? There are some great tools to be able to look this up. I know the Workforce Services in the state of Utah has some great resources that allow you to break down jobs to find out specifically what are they paid at entry level, but also what are they paid in certain areas. I mean, they break it down to Washington County, to Central Utah, and other areas where you can say, this is what I could anticipate in this area. So you're ready with that baseline, what am I worth? And that's really important to understand, what are others making?
No, Brandon, I think location is incredibly important because you could spend all this time researching your salary for one area and go to another area and find out that you're all wrong. And that's kind of nerve-wracking. Other great places are Glassdoor.com. There's job boards in California. They have to post by law. They have to post salaries. So they're also a good resource. But, again, California is a different cost of living. And then there's also industry reports that you can gather this information. Again, research is so important. Just like in your job search, everything related to finding a job, getting a job, and negotiating salary comes down to research.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure you understand that, because if you go into a job and then without doing your research, and they ask you, tell us what you think you should be making for this job, and you indicate something that's way too high for your area, they may not consider you anymore. Or let's say you say way too low. What happens then?
They're going to take that low salary and be so excited that they're saving money.
Yep, and you are missing out on a lot of money potentially, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think it's important, again, to do that research, but also understand a few other factors. Consider cost of living where you're going. You talked about this, Madalyn, a little bit there, but understand there are places that are more expensive. So even though you may be making a little bit more, perhaps you're actually making less in the end because of that.
Absolutely.
And so there's some great research. I don't know if you've been on NerdWallet. They've got a cost of living calculator on there that allows you to say where you are and where you're going to see the difference between the cost of what would be there. But there's other things like your years of experience that you need to take in consideration, the level of the level degree or knowledge or education that you have. So all these things you need to take into account when you understand first what they're paying in that area, and then add the other things that you have with that.
Yep, I think all of that is great. I also recommend looking at rent prices for the area too, because that's really going to highly significantly impact your salary negotiation as well.
Well, and we can't forget that it's not just about salary.
No.
Right? I mean, when we talk about an overall package of what you're going to get from an employer, what you're paying in health care and what you're paying for other benefits is also part of that. And you need to understand that even though you might, again, make more money in your salary, you might come out in the end lower if those benefits aren't great too.
Right. If you only have 1 week off per year and you're making a set salary, but another job is offering 3 weeks off per year for the same salary, you're actually making less money, even with that job with less vacation time.
Yeah,
so
right.
salary isn't just your paycheck.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for talking about salary and benefits, right? I loved that you touched on benefits there. That is really important when deciding on if you want a job or not. Let's jump into understanding your value, right? So you can share with them, especially when you're in that negotiating process, why you would be of value to them and how you can benefit them, right? And then remind me at the end of this, I would love to have you reenact a salary negotiation for
wow.
our listeners.
Okay.
I think that could be really valuable, right?
Okay, absolutely. Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about your value.
So I think it's really important for you to, again, go back to when you're looking for a job and you're looking at your skills. I want you to take an inventory of your own skills, your own worth, and know what you're contributing to that company. A lot of people have some great transferable skills that can't be taught easily. And so look at that. Look at what you're worth after that. And then also look at your qualifications, the achievements you've made. If you're hit a dean's list, that shows that you have some hard work and dedication. But this is where you really need to be confident and advocate for yourself in these kinds of situations. I also recommend that students set up a budget before doing their salary negotiation, because there's going to be payments and things like that, like insurance or student loan payments if you took student loans out, rent payments, things like that. And so if you don't know how much you need to live, then you don't know how to negotiate your salary in the right way.
If you do what you're talking about, Madalyn, if you do the right research, you understand your set of skills, and you've kind of went through all of those types of things, understand the education you're bringing to the table, you know the salary that you should be making, you should go in there confident knowing that if they ask me this question, I can validate why I'm worth what I am. And that's really what we're trying to get at, right? Is if it comes to this, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but once we get there, it's important to be able to have confidence in understanding why I'm worth what I'm about to negotiate, right?
Right. Knowledge is power, everybody. And
Yep.
so like when you have that confidence behind you, and make sure you have some things written down on that piece of paper going into a salary negotiation, so you feel that confidence going in.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for talking about your value and understanding that and utilizing that in the negotiation process. Let's bring in preparing for negotiations. So we've talked about all of this, right? Researching salary and benefits, understanding your value. Now let's dive into actually preparing. You're getting ready to go negotiate.
Yeah, this is where not only preparation but practice comes into play, right? It's not natural for all of us to do this. Some of us are better than others, right? I'm not one of them.
I'm not
Okay,
great.
so this is something, but it can be learned. And again, if you have confidence in why you're worth what you are, it's easier to have those conversations. So a few things I'd suggest: participate and practice with others, right? Like take those that you trust and have them ask you these questions and kind of run it by them a little bit. Prepare all your notes and research you've done beforehand. Make sure you have those things available that you can go over, you know what I mean, with yourself prior to going to the salary negotiation or your interview, right? But also make sure that there's a technique I know they use in the negotiating world called BATNA, right? Your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Understand what the lowest amount it is that you'd take, right? And then you want to try to understand what that is, and then where you're worth, right? What you're trying to get. So there's the lowest, what you're trying to get, and then what would be basically gravy, right? And so you can identify those ranges a little bit to see and where you hope to be able to get in your negotiations, because what you're trying to find is the overlap between you and the employer and all of that, right? If you can find that perfect spot, that's where you want to be. But if they are stringent or stick to that, they're going to be underneath of what you need. You need to be willing to walk away from some of those negotiations if they're not willing to give you what you're worth.
Yeah, I think that sets a bad precedent if you go in and just agree because they wouldn't go with you. I mean, that shows that they may not value you as much as you'd like to be. And also understand that as part of your best alternative to a negotiated agreement would be like to advocate for yourself for in different areas, like maybe it's more contribution to a 401k or something like that versus just salary up front.
Right.
So make sure you have that information and know where you're most comfortable. Again, going back to that budget, understanding how much money you need to survive, I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing how we can prepare for that. Yeah. Let's now move into how to do it, right? We've talked about a lot of preparation. Let's talk about actually negotiating salary now.
Let's do it. So if an employer, and this is the first thing I suggest, in any good negotiation, we already know this, do not reveal what it is that you want first if possible. Everybody out there
Absolutely.
hopefully knows that, but I know we're all working on that. But if an employer asks you, they say, Madalyn, what you've come in today, we've had a great conversation. What are you hoping to obtain from a salary, or what do you want for a salary? This is an opportunity for us, hopefully, to deflect, right? First of all,
Yeah.
if we don't have the job, the first deflection is, if we don't have the job offer at this point, I would probably say, I'm so happy that you're willing to talk about that with me and open about negotiating salary. I hope, I'm hoping first to be offered the job. If this is an offer, this is great. I'd love to have that conversation. If not, I'm hoping to wait till we, push that off till we have a job offer. I'd love to talk about that more at that point. But what you don't want to do is work yourself right out of a job before you're even offered, because once you're offered the job, now they want you, right? Now you know. But if they continue to ask, even if you have a job offer and they continue to ask, at some point, you want to try to deflect to them and say, what is it you typically, and this is what I usually ask, is what is it you typically offer people with my experience and education who are coming into your company? What do you typically offer them for a salary?
Brandon, that's an excellent question, and it's not confrontational or anything like that. It's a great information seeking, and it just helps you in that negotiation process. And hopefully they respond with you with a salary range, and if it's ideal for you, Brandon, what do? Do you keep going, or should you just let it go?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, this is where your BATNA that we talked about earlier, right? You know what the minimum is, you know where you hope to get, and you know what's gravy, right? And so if they come out and they're in your gravy range, you could right there. You try to hold a straight face, okay? Don't throw the confetti yet, right? Like, try to hold a straight face, but at that point, you can talk through some other things, but you already know that's where you wanted to be. At that point, why continue to negotiate unless you see an open door, right? If they say this is the range, you know what I mean? Then you might be able to say, okay, well, a little wiggle room there, but don't at that point get overwhelmed and continue to seek more. If you already know, boy, that's gravy where I wanted to be, that you might be able to settle at that point with them. If it's under, then you better be able to tell them why you're worth more.
Absolutely. It goes back to that self-reflection, that self-research. What are the skills that you have? If they come at you with that a lower salary range, say, because of these skills, abilities, and that I own and I possess, that I have in front of you right now, I believe my worth is between this range and this range.
Yeah.
And it's always great to do a range, isn't it, Brandon?
Absolutely. And you can say, the research I did through the Department of Workforce Services or Labor Market Information showed that people are coming in, let's say, $50,000, right? So they're coming in just at this. I've also got this certificate, I've had this many years experience, I've done this and this. I think with those types of things, I'd be fair to ask for 54. But again, it's just, you need to know why you're asking for the extra 4,000. If you're coming in with just a diploma, not a lot of experience, you're probably not justified in asking 54 because of what's your justification at that point. But if you come in with the knowledge of what they typically make, and that sets the baseline for you to be able to have the negotiation you want, and then on top of that, why you're worth the extra what you're asking for, then I think it's fair to have that conversation.
I think it's really important to have that conversation, because there are some times when employers aren't really aware that their salary range is below the market value. I've had that happen with employers when they called me and said, I'm not getting people for this position. And we had that conversation that you're really, really low. And if I was in the hiring position, I would love to have someone come back and give me some actual tangible data on why that's not a great salary.
Right.
So there's so many different layers to why it's important to do this.
Right. And again, it starts all up front, right, as we're doing that. Now, I would say this, once you do settle with them. Now, again, I do want to stress that negotiation is not just about salary. There's all kinds of things you can actually negotiate. I know of people who've negotiated childcare as part of their package, right? People who've negotiated working remotely. People who've negotiated working certain days or times that they want. And so there's lots of things that you can negotiate, but you just need to be willing to have that conversation with the employer once they want you. Again, that's what I stress. Once you know they want you, you understand that it's a lot easier to have that conversation at that point. But if you start prying into all these things before that, they may go, man,
yeah,
I don't know. We have this other candidate we were thinking about too. You know what I mean?
Right. If you're bringing up all this stuff the minute you meet them, they don't want to talk to you. You've got to at least be the one that they want before you start going into all of this.
Right. And here's the last thing I'd say. Once you know and you settle on whatever it is you negotiate with the employer, your salary, benefits, and those extras, get it in writing.
Oh, such a great.
And there's I think there's good ways to ask that. I mean, you can simply say, "Hey, I'd love to have what we settle on today in writing," or do you usually write this up at a contract? Is that what you informally do at your business? I mean, but in some way, try to get that in writing from them, because there's also been times I know people negotiated things. They're a month into it, they find out they don't have that, and it is really difficult to go back and help them remember what you negotiated at that point.
Absolutely, especially if they have a bunch of contracts that they're signing. If they're hiring multiple people at that time, they might forget. And it's good for you too to know what to plan and to show anyone who might need proof of employment too.
And there may be some atypical things that you negotiated, and if those aren't being honored, then at least you have that in writing to say, "Hey, here's what we negotiated," and carry that out that way. So
it's all about empowering you. I love it.
Yep.
Thank you, Brandon and Madalyn, for joining us on this podcast and talking about negotiating salary. We learned today that the process ahead of time in negotiation and doing that research is just as important as learning how to negotiate, right?
Absolutely.
So thank you. And thanks, listeners, for tuning in to Career Cafe today on our episode, The Worth of Your Work, Negotiating Salary and Benefits. And then don't forget to tune in next week on Decisions and Destinations, Navigating How to Accept and Decline Opportunities with Poise. And then, of course, don't forget to give us a follow on social media, specifically Instagram at SU Career Center. And don't forget to subscribe. But I have to end with a dad joke, of course. I'm selling a book entitled How to Be an Expert in Negotiations. I'll accept any price for it.
Oh, boy. Okay.
What a negotiator.
What a great negotiator.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.